Welcome Window to China and the Xinyu One. Today I have distinguished guest, the author of Tales of Dragon, Mr. William Tang. Can you introduce yourself, please?
How do you do? I am William Tang. I write under the pen name of Tang Long. I'm a research analyst. I'm from Taiwan. My father was from mainland China, and my mother is from Taiwan. I grew up in New York, and I have been in the United States for over 52, going on 53 years. And I enjoy teaching, so I think it is a fun job to write about Chinese history and culture to inform people.
Thank you. So his book, The Tales of Dragon, actually really have impression on me. When I look at it also, wow, that's tales and the dragon, that's typically symbolic to Chinese culture. So we hope you will like it. I have read this book already. Can you tell us the contents of this book?
Well, the Tales of the Dragon is the general title. I write all my books about China. And the subtitle of the book is the Book of Lore. That means lore, meaning stories, about Chinese stories. And the book consists of 3 parts. It's an anthology of Chinese history and culture. And the first part is, I call it Legends and Fables. It is about the origin and tradition of Chinese New Year, which is approaching on February 19th. The Year of the Goat is coming up. Mid-Autumn Full Moon Festival, the Matchmaker God. Basically, it's like the Chinese version of the Greek mythology. It's of Greek mythology, of Chinese mythology, because you go into bookstores, you hardly ever find anything like that. And the second portion of the book, I call it historical inspirationals. Basically, they are stories from Chinese history that inspire people. Chinese parents, schools use those stories like Aesop's fables to inspire children to be moral, high-spirited, well-to-do people. And that's what they use. And one of my favorite stories in the book, in this portion, is called a 7-step poem, in which every Chinese in China knows about the Qi Bu Si, the 7-step poem, in which a prince was ordered by his brother, the king, to make up a poem within the time you take to take 7 steps. And the prince not only did it, he also wrote a poem so that it is in congruence with the situation, sort of very gently insulting his brother for threatening to kill him this way. And Chinese like intelligent, smart people like that, and they encourage their children to be somebody like that. And then the third portion of the book is my personal short stories that I wrote. And my favorite part of that portion, favorite story, is a martial arts contest in which I put in Billy the Kid, Robin Hood, D'Artagnan, and Musashi Miyamoto, just a #1 samurai of Japan, of course, and Wang Wu, the Big Knife. And this being a Chinese book, and I'm sure everybody knows who's going to win the martial arts contest? The Chinese.
Wow, that's interesting. So what make you write this book?
Well, I grew up in the United States. I came here when I was 12 years old. My entire schooling, the history of China consisted of half a page in a book in social studies class. That's all. And you go to any bookstore right now, you want to find a good, decent book about Chinese history and culture that is not a heavy academic tone. That's almost impossible to find. So I decided to write a book that's easy reading. You can, from grade school up, everybody and anybody can read it. And you will be interesting reading. It won't put you to sleep. You pick it up, you read it, and you like it so much, you won't be able to put it down until you finish reading it. And that's what I like to do.
It is storytelling. Everybody wants to listen to the story, especially kids. And then before the sleep, they want parents read stories on the bed, right?
Yeah.
That's a good idea. So what is the target of audience you expect to read your book?
Well, my target audience is very broad. I would say anybody that's interested in China, anybody that's interested in a good story, they should be interested in. Also, I would like to target the ABCs, what we call American-born Chinese, because many people, they have not learn about or have forgotten their roots, where they came from. And to the Chinese, it is very important to remember your roots. And I wrote it for the Chinese to show their children what their culture was like, and also to teach Westerner about Chinese history and culture. But also my hope, my greatest audience, I hope, is the book will sell in China, because of the billion or so people in China, every one of them knows the stories in my book. However, if they pick up my book, they read my book in English, they know the story by heart, and they could use that to learn English. It's like you and me reading Tom Sawyer in Chinese and using that as a textbook for learning Chinese. They could use my book to learn English. And hopefully that would be of interest to them. And it is very, very easy reading, very easy understanding, very easy textbook.
That is a big goal. That's a big market in China. Million people is billion people probably. Now people want to learn English.
Yeah.
Then I think the best things they can learn from your book is by English and then through the story. I mean,
yeah.
So that's really good. Also, you mentioned you want dispel the misconceptions of
yes.
the Chinese people or China culture. So what is it about?
Well, there are many numerous Western, not just American, Western misconception about Chinese. My pet peeve is chop suey. Everybody think chop suey is a Chinese food. The first time I had chop suey was when I was in high school in the United States. I never had chop suey before in China, in Taiwan, because chop suey is not a Chinese dish. It was invented in San Francisco by a Chinese cook that was ordered by a senior Chinese government official to cook something. He threw all the leftovers together, and stir fried it, put it over some fried noodles, and the Li Hongzhang was official. He was hungry, so when you're hungry, everything tasted good. He loved it, and reporters that was following him, they asked the chef, "What's this dish that Ambassador Li Hongzhang likes so much?" And the chef says it's Cantonese, called chop suey. Chop suey literally means leftovers. So he threw all the leftover there and cooked, and so chop suey became chop suey and became the famous Chinese dish, which you will not find in China.
That's an interesting story. I don't know it. That means leftover.
Yeah. And more importantly, I would like to dispel the misconception that people think Chinese are aiming for global conquest. That is farthest from the truth, because believe it or not, China is one of the major countries in the world that their borders shrunk over the last 200 years instead of expanding. If you study ancient, well, not ancient but Victorian history, you look at a map of China, is a lot bigger than it is now, where Kamchatka, Siberia, and other parts of the Far East used to belong to China under the Imperial Qing dynasty. And after the Opium War, China started retreating, losing parts of this, parts of that. So China has not expanded 1 square inch since 200 years ago. What people argue about Xinjiang, Tibet, they were all part of China 300 years ago, or more than that. And but also, another one I would like to point out is people think the Chinese, the Han race, they are monolithic group of people. That is a misnomer, because Chinese are not, the Han race are not one group of people. It's a melting pot of all sorts of ethnic groups that had melded together under one culture over 5,000 years. It's like United States is a melting pot of predominantly European migrants. French, German, English, well, Chinese were like that. And you tell the Northern Chinese he's the same as the Southern Chinese, and you have a fisticuffs. And same thing with, well, another thing is, I would like to say, people think Chinese is a difficult language. That is the farthest thing from the truth. I will say it now, I say Chinese is the easiest language to learn in the world. Personally, I speak 3 dialects of Chinese. I speak Mandarin, Cantonese, Taiwanese. Also, I'm fluent in Spanish. And I speak some Japanese, German, and I dabble a little bit in English. But Chinese is a pictograph. It's very simple, and there's no grammatical changes. We don't have to worry about past, present, future, progressive, first, second, third person, singular, plural, none of that. One word is take care of all grammatical conjugations. Let's say I say, yesterday I go to school. Grammatically, In English, it's atrocious. But did you understand what I say? So if you understood what I say, what's the purpose of the language? Communications. If you can communicate in the language, that's what counts. Grammatics, that's for the teachers to grade you. But you got the idea across. So I say Chinese is the easiest language in the world.
Wow, so I'm
Trust
glad that
me.
you have very profound idea and thought. I mean, I can see you have done quite a bit of research. Can you tell me what is the resource you get it for this book, particularly for this book? Also your language study. I mean, I can hear. So your profound idea and thought.
Well, my book material I learned when I was a child on the knees of my grandparents. And I also listened, when I was growing up, we didn't have television. We listened to radio programs, and we have what they call 说书, talking books. Basically, it's people sitting at a street corner or in coffee shops, and they just sit over there and they tell you historical anecdotes, stories like the romance of the Three Kingdoms, 三国演义, things like that. And you hear about these things, and you get a lot of ideas, and you ingrain yourself in it. And I always love to read. I have read all the Chinese classics, and that's basically how I get it. I read as many books. I love books, so by reading a lot, I learn a lot, and then I try to infuse them into my books so that everybody would be able to enjoy them as much as I did.
I'm interested in your concept about Chinese occupation in the world, because through the media, we can hear many times they talk about as Xinjiang, talk about Tibet. They don't have, their rights to pursue the religions, and not freedom at all. So that's but you seems you give me the picture that is originally from China. It's part of territory from China long time ago. Also, you mentioned in Yuan dynasty, actually it's not Han occupied all the time, so dominate all the time. It's from Mongolia group, that is a minority group. Then finally they like male part, then they all together as the Qing dynasty, it's the Manchu group, right?
Yeah.
So China is the same US. This is a big melting pot. That's what I think is China and the US. This the biggest, the greatest country to me, to myself.
Oh yes, China is you can say the opposite of United States in many ways. They are in opposite sides of the world, but they're also very similar in terms of geopolitical location. They have the great expanse of areas, they have the mountains, rivers. The only difference, American rivers mostly runs north-south, whereas the Chinese river run east-west. And that's what the main difference is. But otherwise, China is very similar to United States. And now they have their cold climates, the Manchurian coldness, like the northeastern United States. And then they have the hot tropics in the south, in Taiwan, Hainan Island.
I'm interested in also, Beijing and Washington D.C. It's located the same, the level.
Yeah, the parallel lines,
right,
longitudes.
Different to the globe. It's different side of the globe. Its weather is similar. Its culture is similar. I mean, it's really interesting, the coincidence. I mean, really good. So you also say this is the author of the Tales of the Dragon, okay? So you tell me the difference about American and Chinese culture. Also, you said this is the first book of your books now. Yeah. Do you have any other projects?
In fact, I have first Tales of the Dragon, the Book of Lore is my first book. The second book, I somehow, in a moment of weakness, I allowed my dog to persuade me to co-author with him. It's called Pets Only.
Does he speak Chinese or English?
He doesn't speak Chinese. He understands Chinese commands.
For example?
For example, I tell him to sit or stay, and he sits and stays. And basically, I wrote a book with him. And the Pets Only is about a restaurant in which it's operated by pets in Virginia, and people that wants to eat in the restaurant, they have to be accompanied by a pet. No pets, no service. You cannot get in. And I thought it was an interesting story, and I have collected many stories over the years. I'm also a pet trainer, so I used every single story in the book is based on true pet stories that I have picked up over the years. And my next book, I already wrote. I'm also a columnist with the WashingtonTimes.com. I have the Tales of the Dragon column, and it tells people about Chinese history, culture, etiquettes, and things like that. What's the favorite number, the dining etiquette, the favorite color, and things to do or not to do when dealing with a Chinese. And I took those articles I wrote in my column, I put them together, and I call it the Chinese slant. Chinese slant being looking at the world from the Chinese point of view. And my third book in the Chinese series, I call Tales of the Dragon, the Book of War. And I think that is a book that is very relevant in this world, because you study military history, and human race, the growth is through, like it or not, military struggles. You hear about Napoleon, World War II. Well, in China, they have their military heroes, and I wrote about the Chinese counterparts to George S. Patton, Alexander the Great, Julius Caesar, and Napoleon. And to cite one case, in 260 BC, there was the Battle of Changping, in which I would say 99.9% of the people in the world don't know about. Many Chinese don't know about the battle. In that battle, 400,000 people in 260 BC, that's 2,000, almost 2,300, but 2,070 some years ago, they got captured from one kingdom. They were captured by another kingdom. After they were captured, they were massacred. 400,000 soldiers were killed in one night. And that is about 1/10 of the population of that kingdom. So that is something like 1/10 of American population, let's say 330 million, something like that. 1/10 of that, 33 million people wiped out in one night. And that is something that is very significant in Chinese history. It made possible the creation of China, because if the battle did not turn out that way, we would not have China today, because the kingdom that won that battle 40 years later, they went on to conquer the rest of China, because that was after that battle, nobody was able to stop them. And in 40 years, they conquered China and created the Qin dynasty. And that's where the name China came about, because the Qin dynasty created the Qin imperial empire. And then when the Silk Road caravans carried the power of the imperial Qin dynasty to the west, to Arabia, and then to Rome, the name, the Qin imperial empire, became bastardized into China. And that's how the name China came about, because of that battle. And that's one of the stories I wrote about in my book, The Book of War.
Speak of China, what do you think is China's role in the 21st century?
Well, I would say that is going to be depending on the rest of the world, and particularly United States, because United States, like it or not, we are the leader of the world. And last week, China just took over from the United States as the largest economy of the world. Just last week.
You mean it's become the first?
Yes, China is the number one economy.
Of the GDP?
I just read it in the newspaper. They say in a news release, China overtook the United States in terms of largest economy of the world. And there are more room for cooperation than confrontation between the two giants. And it is up to us to decide what we want to do with it. Do we want China as a friend or a foe? And I say to the audience, beware of what you wish for. You just might get it.
Why they don't now? It seems not many areas they don't cooperate.
I would say one of the reasons is they don't understand each other, and which is the purpose of my writing these books, so that people would understand Chinese. And that's why I like to have my book, The Chinese Slang, out there. Basically, it teaches people how the Chinese think the way they do. To get into the Chinese mind, the Chinese mindset. The more you understand them, less chance for misunderstanding. And the more you know them, the less likely you will be fighting them. You have disagreements, you have arguments, but they are less likely to have fights.
We're looking for your next book. It's Chinese Slang. Also, we appreciate what you do, build a bridge between the Chinese culture and American culture. Thank you for joining us. Then we see you next time.
Thank you very much. Bye-bye.